Hey there, Penn State fans. It's Greg Pickel and David Eckert coming to you from a Holiday Inn across the street from Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. We're here, of course, for Big Ten Media Days. But, David, we had to come back to our base camp here for a good reason. We had to get ready and help our buddy Ryan Snyder with Dani Dennis-Sutton's commitment announcement. And let's cut right to the chase. He picked Penn State.
Yeah, and what I think one of the interesting things from today was there were some hints from James Franklin that might be the case. But
Yes.
yeah, obviously a huge get for Penn State. I believe should he sign, which we have assumed that he will, it'll be their first 5-star to sign since 2018 when they had 2. So that's a huge deal. So yeah. Big day for Penn State all around.
There's no doubt about it. I wrote in the takeaways that James Franklin had a little bit of pep in his step today, and obviously knowing this was coming was certainly a part of that. But I think another part of it, too, was simply the fact that he's back with his family. They're all reunited again. And so let's roll into Big Ten Media Days, what we heard, what we saw. He talked at the podium, and then he spent plenty of time looking, around different parts of Lucas Oil Stadium, trying to envision what it would be like to be back there again since like they were in 2016. And obviously, you see him there on the Big Ten Network set, smiling. He's smiling, I'm sure, even bigger now that Dani Dennis-Sutton committed. But, Dave, give me your starting takeaways from what you heard, both from James Franklin and his players today.
Yeah. Well, My first takeaway is kind of similar, right? I mean, James Franklin was in a great mood today.
Yeah. How couldn't you be? It's 5-star Thursday, yes.
Absolutely, yeah. Very happy James Franklin today. A James Franklin that was willing to talk about some topics that maybe he isn't always willing to talk about, willing to indulge us on some things. But yeah, we had some news on Lonnie White that we'll get into, some talk about Noah Cain. So yeah, maybe not a huge news day,
right.
but definitely some takeaways for us to talk about.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I mean, so when James Franklin, this is his 8th time at 7th time, because there wasn't one last year, at Big Ten Media Days. He experienced 3 SEC Media Days. He knows how to play the game at this point, right? I mean, at one point during his hour-long table session, multiple times actually, he was curious when they would be able to leave, when it would be over. But he also said that his goal is to not make national headlines, right? Not make national news, not be the guy that says something crazy. He was asked about the reports of Texas and Oklahoma maybe leaving the Big 12, going to the SEC, and he said, I have strong opinions on that, and I'm not getting into it. He did think about it, though. But in terms of news, yeah, not a whole lot of new things. I mean, look, I think we all knew that they don't know who the second quarterback is, Taquan Roberson or Christian Mayor. We'll have to see how camp works out. He's excited about Mike Yurcich. He loves Brent Pry. He thinks Joe Lorik's the best special teams coordinator in the country. He's happy about a lot of the weapons that they have on offense. He thinks the linebackers are great. The secondary could be the best one they've had. I mean, none of this is really a surprise to Penn State fans, but the one bit of news, like you mentioned, was the Lonnie White stuff. And he did, I think, give as much hope as you could possibly give members of Nittany Nation that maybe Lonnie White will pass up that likely $1 million signing bonus that we think is going to come from the Pittsburgh Pirates, who took him number 64 in the MLB draft, and instead play baseball and football at Penn State.
Yeah, so, obviously James talked a little bit about his conversation with Lonnie's family and how, he really just wants the best for Lonnie, which is what you have to say if you're in James Franklin's position, right? I mean, you can't go full I want him. He has to come. The Pirates are bad for this reason. That's not how you have to play this game if you're James Franklin. So but yeah, obviously maybe a little bit of hope there.
Yep.
That deadline August 1st is kind of approaching. Maybe
yes.
kind of.
Yeah,
in the background.
Exactly, right. Yeah, James Franklin kept saying that they could extend it up until training camp or beyond. I don't think the MLB is going to allow that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. My takeaway was, if I came into the day thinking it was 90-10 baseball, I might be closer to 60-40, 50-50.
Really?
I really don't know. Did you get the same sense, or are you still thinking that maybe this is all just a long shot in the dark?
I still think it's a little bit of a long shot, right? It's so much money.
Right.
It's so much money. And the $1 million that we're talking about, it could be more, depending on, how much the Pirates like him and how much they're willing to kind of play the game in baseball's convoluted draft system.
Correct.
We don't have to get into too much, but
yeah.
So, yeah, I would probably be at like 70-30 right now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hey, I think Penn State fans will take that as opposed to 95-5 or 99-1 or 90-10. So we'll see. But yeah, that was an interesting back and forth. And you could tell that James Franklin, like probably most people, literally didn't know much of anything about the MLB draft or how it works. So he said they've learned a lot. His buddy, Tim Corbin, the Vanderbilt baseball coach, I'm sure, has been a tremendous sounding board throughout all this. And we'll see. I mean, Penn State starts camp in about 2 weeks, and they're going to have Lonnie White's decision probably the week before that.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And, just kind of as an aside, who's probably hoping even bigger than James Franklin that Lonnie White chooses Penn State is Rob Cooper.
Yes, correct. Yes, Rob Cooper would really appreciate putting that kind of a player out on the ball field. Yes. I'm sure Rob Cooper has been a benefit. I don't want to slight him, but yeah, I'm sure he's been a big part of this as well. But yeah, I think the Nittany Lions on the diamond could use a guy like Lonnie White patrolling out there on the field. So, all right. Other than that, any other final thoughts on James Franklin and what he had to say today? I mean, we have a lot of stuff up on the site. It's currently Dani Dennis-Sutton.bwi.rivals.com, but there's going to be plenty of photos and more stories from us and Nate and Ryan, of course, as the day unfolds. We still got another day to go tomorrow. Penn State won't be here. That won't keep you and I from finding things to share with all of you. But yeah, any other final thoughts from James? I just think that looking back over it, there was not, and we never expected. There wasn't really any big news wow moment.
No.
But the Lonnie White stuff was interesting. The Noah Cain stuff was good to hear, and he obviously hit a lot of the same tunes, familiar when it comes to NIL. Obviously supports it in the players. When it comes to expanded playoff, wants every conference to do the same thing. He's been saying that for years. That's no surprise. And he got asked a handful of questions about Iowa and Rutgers and Ohio State, and that's just the way this event goes. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing that I would bring up is there's a phrase that he said in his opening statement about NIL that seems to be catching some at least on our message board, catching some heat, where he says he doesn't view it as a recruiting tool, more or less. I don't know if I'm quoting him verbatim there.
That was close, yeah.
So, yeah, I get, to me, what he's trying to do there is he's trying to send a message to recruits. He's saying, I care about you here.
Right. Yes.
I'm not trying to get what I want out of it. It's about you.
Correct.
And that might not be what the fans want to hear if you take it in a literal sense.
Right.
But I don't think that there was any reason to really
read too much into that. Yeah. No, I not only completely agree about that, but let's be honest, and Ryan and I talked about this on a previous show, but it's not always going to be the best advantage for Penn State. Bryce, if we are to believe Nick Saban, which I don't know why, well, I guess he has a reason to maybe inflate the number a little bit, but still, Bryce Young, the quarterback at Alabama, supposedly has almost 7 figures in NIL deals. Penn State, what's the highest on the Penn State roster right now? I don't, what?
No,
I would say maybe 1,000. 5,000 would be where I absolutely would top it out. I wouldn't even know who to guess which player it was. So it may not be, at least in the moment, a huge recruiting advantage for Penn State. So even in the literal sense, I think you just have to accept that there's not, Penn State quarterback Sean Clifford's going to sign autographs at a Central Pennsylvania restaurant on Saturday. What's he making there? $250, $300. It's at Black and Blue in Mechanicsburg. Great people, and they want to do something for Penn State players and Sean Clifford, and that's the kind of people you need to make this a recruiting tool. But you also need some bigger bucks behind it, and that'll only come in time. So, yeah, I think you're right, though. That I didn't necessarily think about that when we sat down to record, but it's a good point that is going to probably catch some heat. But I think when you put context to it, you can really understand what he's trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, I think we're probably about halfway through this Blue White Illustrated podcast video recapping Big Ten Media Days. We touched on Dani Dennis-Sutton picking Penn State. Let's get into the players, and you got to spend a little bit more time with them than I did. So, let's start with Jahan Dotson.
Sure.
He made the Big Ten official preseason East Division honoree team.
That's a mouthful.
This morning. Yeah. Yes, that's a little bit much. We're going to have to you shortened it up, or Nate did when he wrote it. But at any rate, he is starting to get the recognition that he deserved at the end of last season.
Yes.
And one of the things I was curious about coming into this was how would he handle the attention? He's a pretty soft-spoken guy. In fact, when we started, someone had said, hey, Jahan, the way it was set up was that we were behind ropes essentially, and the players were in front of us. But I mean, it was a social distance kind of a setup, and so he's a soft-spoken guy. I had the same concern that we might not be able to hear him. Dave, he projected. He was ready for that moment. He's going to be a star this year. I mean, we knew that, but I feel it even more after today.
Yeah, and he had that. And I'm sure you remember in the I can't remember if it was the winter or the spring where he talked about being legendary, right? And how he wants to be a Penn State legend and all of that. And to me that was surprising because I don't necessarily associate Jahan Dotson with making that kind of claim.
Correct,
so,
right?
But again, I talked to him a little bit about it while everybody was talking to Coach Franklin. I got the chance to talk to some of the players a little bit more, I guess, closely. And Jahan was very. He says there's no pressure. There's no pressure on him. He doesn't feel like he's putting any pressure on himself by maybe talking a bigger game than he used to. He says, I've been playing this game since I was 3. There's no pressure associated with it for me. So, that's a good thing to hear if you're a Penn State fan. And, maybe Jahan Dotson is the guy that starts to rake in some of those NIL dollars.
He was asked about that early on when you were down talking to PJ Mustipher, and he said that he was just letting his parents handle it, any kind of inquiries or brand building, I think is what he said, that his parents were going to handle it. He was focused on winning football games. Okay. And so, again, let's go back to that conversation. We might be a dead horse here, but if every Penn State player is going to approach it that way, either because that's how they want to approach it or because they don't think that opportunities are out there to make it worth their while to worry about it, it's not going to be a recruiting advantage for Penn State.
Sure.
So we'll see. Yep. I think it'll come in time. And again, let's think about it the other way too. If you start September 3-1, 4-0, the excitement's building. Yeah. Guess what? Businesses are going to want to pay Penn State players during the season in the middle of a hot streak to be on TV or promote something on social media or whatever. So let it come in time. I don't think it's an end-all, be-all. I do not think the class of 2022 is going to be worse off, or the class of 2023 is going to be destroyed by NIL. I just don't think that's the case.
I don't think so either.
All right, let's move on to a guy you spent a good bit of time with, PJ Mustipher, the defensive tackle. He is a big human being. I mean, it's when you see him in pads, it's one thing, but to see him sit there in a suit, and we'll put the photo up here so you can see what we saw today out here. I mean, he is just a massive individual, and he is going to be a plugger, I think, for this Penn State defense. What did you learn from him this year?
Yeah, I think...
today, not this year. Yeah, about this year, right.
He talked a little bit more about his weight, right? He's played his sophomore year up around 310, 315. He kind of wants to be there again, and he is. Yep. If you look at him, I mean, the guy's, like you said, he's just massive.
Yep.
But yeah, he was having a good time. He loves this. You can tell he loves doing this stuff.
Absolutely.
So, he was talking a little bit about NIL. He said he's just totally not interested at all. And then someone asked him about, if he had to pick a company, which company would he pick? And he's like, well, I really like coffee. So maybe if this coffee company.
Sure.
So we learned that PJ Mustipher loves coffee. But, he was asked a lot about, some of the new faces on the defensive line, whether that's Arnold Ebiketie or he was also asked about Jordan Vandenberg, who is a guy who, we haven't
new to the program.
Gotten that much analysis from. He's excited about him. He was asked a lot about other people and maybe not that much about himself. But, he's excited. He talked a lot about, again, just kind of like that sick feeling from the 4-5 record last year. Yep. And wanting to, rectify that. So that was kind of the gist from PJ.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and for the record, for those of you who maybe don't follow this event as closely every year or whatever, most guys are asked about other teams, other players, because the way this works is that, so obviously today was a big Penn State day for us. So we had 3 players and a coach here. Well, tomorrow, the Penn State coaches and players, the Penn State, James Franklin and the players will be home, and we'll be looking for that insight from other programs about Penn State. So it's not like they were slighting PJ Mustipher. It's just there's only so many Penn State people here to ask questions, plus the players overlap with James Franklin. So anyway, that's just a little peek behind the curtain. You can get all kinds of other news and notes, bwi.rivals.com. And for the magazine, we can't forget to plug the magazine.
That's
116-page exclusive magazine. It's ColemanPublishing.com. Go check it out. Get your copy today. Final player that was here. Certainly not last. we're not putting him last because he's the least, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it was much easier for me not to say, apparently. But Tariq Castro-Fields looked great walking around. Obviously, whatever health issue caused him to warm up and then not play so many times last year is behind him. And he seems like a really motivated guy. Not that he wasn't before, but just talking to him, I spent a little bit of time with him, and then you got him pretty much alone, I think, there toward the end. I was just really impressed by the way he talked about not just his own progress, but the team's progress. That really struck me as I don't want to say that they didn't take last year seriously, because that's not fair, but there's just, for all three of these guys, there was a sense of purpose and poise and focus and seriousness and confidence that was just lacking for much of last year. Maybe it wasn't all of them every game, but certainly during that losing streak, at least one of them wasn't anywhere to be found.
I completely agree. All of them were very insightful, and I got a lot out of this, definitely. But for Tariq, I had a 20-minute Zoom with him earlier this spring where we talked a lot about his injury and overcoming that, and I got to follow up on that a little bit with him today, and I asked him about are you thinking about this every day, right? Because if I were him, I would be.
Sure, absolutely.
And he's like, no.
Yep.
It's out of my head. If you're thinking about not getting hurt all the time, you're gonna get hurt.
Yep.
So that's kind of I guess a window into how he's handling everything mentally. Because let's face it, I mean, if he's healthy, he's a massive piece for Penn State.
Absolutely, there's no question.
Massive piece for Penn State.
There is no question.
So that's one of the highest items on their priority list, is making sure he's available. So.
He spoke really highly when I was over there of Johnny Dixon, South Carolina transfer, who was incoming, and he talked really highly of just that room in general. Joey Porter Jr. Just those guys. He's just really. Impressed by. And even AJ Lighton, who you wrote it last night. So we're recording this Thursday evening in Indianapolis. It's about 6 o'clock. This was about 24 hours ago, essentially. The Florida State former 5-star defensive back is come in, and he said he's made a good impression early on. First impression's been good. So you talk about a secondary, Dave, that people have ragged on at times over the years, actually quite a bit over the years, for not enough interceptions, for not enough PBUs, for not enough big plays and big moments, for just getting beat. Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be a big disappointment if this group does that, because it has all the makings of just a phenomenal group. And the one thing I'll say before throwing it back to you is, he said Anthony Poindexter just brings a different kind of juice to the room, I guess is the best way to put it. I guess when you look at the defensive backfield, right, I mean, there's so many options that would have to fail in order for Penn State not to get what it wants out of that position group. It's just, I don't see it. And maybe the one place where, that might not be the case is safety, and that's where Jaquan Brisker is. Exactly.
So, that's just, again, you have to feel great about Penn State's defensive backfield. And James Franklin, as I think you said it before, unprompted during his introductory remarks, said that he thinks this is Penn State's best defensive backfield, and you
hard to argue it. Yeah, hard to argue that on paper. Well, Big Ten Media Days, day one is in the books. Obviously, it's always positive news. Yeah. It's doubly positive when the 5-star kid commits the same day. We'll have plenty of time to get into the other issues. It could be a pitfall for this team this fall, and there are some. But all told, I think it was a good day for Penn State. And I guess the final thought I have, and we'll get yours here, but it's just, again, I keep going back to the fact that there's just the swagger's not the right word, and I hate that word anyway, but there's just a confidence about these guys that really came through. And maybe it was just not interviewing people in person for so long. Maybe it was just last year seemed so bad that everything now, it's like when you come up to a new season, everything feels like it's going to be good. But I don't know. There was just a vibe that was very good, and one that Penn State fans should get really excited about.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that you mentioned, maybe the impact that last year is having on our psyches a little bit, because Nate and I are all writing these better or worse features where we're kind of attempting to break down position groups and whether they'll be better or worse. And I'm pretty sure we've done 4 position groups, and every one of us has said better for all of them.
And for the most part, the problem is that it's hard. I think someone said it in the Lions Den the other day, our premium message board at Blue White Illustrated, that a lot of these positions, you can't really envision a scenario with the additions that they made plus the healthy guys they have back where it could be worse.
Yeah, it doesn't feel possible. So, definitely my takeaway is similar to yours, really. There's plenty of reason to be optimistic here. And again, don't freak out about the NIL stuff. I'll make that my second takeaway.
Yeah.
But
Very good, very good. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Let's just tap the brakes. It's new, it's exciting. I get it, but slow down. Everything will be okay. All right. Well, before we go, it's a picture of the CFP trophy on display here in Indianapolis. That's what everyone's chasing. That's what Penn State is chasing. They talked a little bit about being at Lucas Oil Stadium and the idea of getting back there in December for the Big Ten title game. Jahan Dotson was speaking of things you wouldn't expect him to say. He was like, we have to get here. It's like, we have to do it my senior year. We have to get back here. So that's the mindset these guys have. And again, what would you expect him to say that we don't want to be back here? Sure. But at the same time, sometimes speaking it into existence happens, and these guys seem ready to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Confident group. They feel like they can bounce back from last season. I don't know where the Penn State fan base kind of lands there, but definitely from talking to these guys, there's definitely a surplus of confidence, no doubt.
Yeah. All right. We got to get back to writing, but bwi.rivals.com. You'll find all of the content there. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when the next video comes up. You're going to want to keep an eye out too. T. Frank Carr and Nate Ballard recorded a special Dani Dennis-Sutton episode that is coming out this evening. I believe they're doing it live. Actually, they could be doing it right now as we're doing this. But at any rate, keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for all of the Penn State football and recruiting news you need at bwi.rivals.com. He's David Eckert. I'm Greg Pickel, and we'll catch you next time.